Welcome to part 2 of the video, and let's dig right into where do the myths come from. So you've got all the myths about how bad was the medieval medicine. Well, where did they come from? First of all, there was the Black Death that was a major case. Then the Renaissance started piling on a bunch of myths upon the medieval era in order to feel better about itself, which was also done by the Lumiere, the Victorians, and many other people of ill repute. They put all of those myths and preconceived ideas and lies upon the medieval era. Then of course the Renaissance was a backward period where a lot of things regressed, from women's rights to hygiene, and the regression in hygiene, also in medicine by extension, led to a bunch of myths that, despite being things that applied to the Renaissance, were instead put on the back of the medieval era. And then as a fourth problem, we've got bad faith. Lots of bad faith. Now, if we go back to the Black Death, what did actually happen and how were things really? Back in the day, you had a few diseases that no one could cure. Leprosy was one, the Black Death was another. There were several plagues. In fact, it was nothing new back in the days, just that they weren't that widespread. So nowadays, we have this idea of an illness of the century. Back in the day, we would have been, okay, at this place, we've got this city that has been infected and has some problems, but a few people in a city that die. This is not a widespread problem, especially when most of the people live in the countryside. So even back in the day, the disease of the century, or whichever was the equivalent, would have been mostly limited. So no people did not live in a constant state of being diseased and under constant epidemic. It's just that we took all of the records, because they recorded everything, and decided to badly interpret everything. Now, they would have their disease of the century or the equivalent. By the way, in the 20th century, we had the Spanish flu. A few years ago, we had the COVID, and they caused a lot of problems. But with COVID, we had no excuses. So, going back to the Black Death, this was the first time something was that massive and sparse spread. So sure, you could have a plague before that, but the bubonic variant was so widespread, it was so contagious, went beyond anything known. To deal with problem, I do remind that they did not have such an idea as germ theory, and that means that they weren't aware that there was this bacteria on a tick, on a rat, and that the rat spread everywhere, and that this was the problem. We learned afterward from lots of things, going from records to archaeological evidence and studying a lot of side details. But back in the day, they did not know. And since medieval knowledge is in good part based on a tradition that comes from trial and error, facing the know, all they could do was do some trial and error. This led to a lot of things that from our point of view look ridiculous, but back in the day was an almost proto-scientific method. But if the chicken does not seem to be affected by the plague, does that mean that the chicken has an interesting property that guards against it? So from then on, that people trying various methods of cooking chicken, rubbing chicken of them, lots of ridiculous things. Did it work? No. But was there a logic behind it? Yes, the chicken was not affected, and they recorded it. When they had their records, they went, okay, that did not work, let's try the next thing. This has led to a lot of speculation, and yes, of course, there were things that we put akin to witch-hunt in modern eyes, because people got desperate, and people in desperation do crazy things. But guess what? During COVID, we had people killing, well, not quite killing each other, but getting quite violent for toilet paper. So we actually have no right to judge them, especially with how much better the presentism people think we are. But in fact, we do have everything deep in that we sit upon, so acting as bad would be really moronic on our part. But guess what? People preach containment. In fact, containment, the very idea of quarantine, was developed during the Black Death. They had this problem of the disease spreading far, and of course, even if they did not know how it spread, they found ways to contain it, and that led to the idea of quarantine. And nowadays we have the idea of social distancing, but it is merely a descendant of this thing that they had to develop from nothing. The idea of quarantine did not exist before. They had to invent it and perfect it. And so they did that, and that's the point. It's they had to develop a lot of things. They tried a grand number of ideas to save the day. Not a lot worked. Quarantine was one of the things that worked best. Now the Plague Doctor of Fate also had some success. The big was because they had to put flour to protect them against bad smells, because miasma theory, but being completely covered would have helped them a lot in terms of not getting directly infected. This is an example, and the current day asthmatics are a descendant of this idea of being completely isolated. Granted, the idea that being fully covered would protect was a later discovery, but it still had an idea of trying not to touch the infected things, but being fully covered, something new. So we got all of these inventions, some decent, a lot bad. When I say inventions, I should say trial and errors, and later periods trying to discredit the medieval era. Well, they focused on all the bad parts, took them out of context, and just went it all bad faith of, now we're gonna ignore the context, all the ingenuity or logic in a proto-scientific method era of the reflections that they could have had, and just call them wacko. So all of this bad faith due to the Black Death led to all of these preconceived ideas. Well, a lot. Then came the Renaissance. Because of the Black Death, in the Renaissance, people had this theory that the water enlarge the spores of the skin, and that make disease easier to get into the person, and that therefore water was deadly, which meant that they washed as little as possible, and when they did, often they tried a dry wash, so taking a cloth, scrubbing yourself using perfumes and whatnot, all because they were afraid of water. This scare of water led of course to a drawback in hygiene, of course trying to reject most of the advances of the medieval era because they were on the Greco-Romans. That made them lose a lot of progress. Sure, they still kept a few elements like the quarantines because they said that this worked, but overall there was a lot of regression. In first part I spoke of one of the rare examples with Louis XIV getting a special wound removed, but this is one of the rare examples. And as all the periods that came after the Renaissance like to do, problems in the Renaissance were inflicted upon the medieval era, on top of course the things that the Renaissance inflicted upon the medieval era, and that all of this projection mixed with all of the bad faith led to of course things being put widely out of proportion. And to give you an idea, the Black Death that was a few decades on a period that is a millennium long, so a very fraction, and it was the one disease, the one time that it went continent-wide, and as mentioned, one thing that gets really big, really bad, but it's a few decades long, on a millennium period. So really the idea of everyone being under the constant threats of danger of everyday disease, this is blowing things out of proportion by a massive amount. For the return of the medicine, that would have waited until at least Napoleon, where during the Napoleonic Wars, the surgeon in Napoleon's army would then rediscover the importance of washing wounds, washing your toes, and so on. That would have led to a much better recovery rate, that led to a much lower casualty rate in the Napoleonic army. Of course, not dying led to a lot of soldiers to be able to go back. That means soldier retention, training retention, quality retention, and that is one of the elements that made Napoleon so much better than everyone else, to the point they had to gang pile on him. But the true advancement would have to wait even much later, with of course the developments of gem theory and people getting to really widespread the idea that you need to be clean. Because yes, 19th century, you had hospitals with drastically ridiculous death rate because no one washed anything, and when people started to wash again, this had to be kind of rediscovered. They were frowned upon even when their survival rate were much higher, and this was a process. People had to learn to be clean again, but eventually they did, and eventually get back to a certain point. And of course, some inventions, as I said, gem theory, penicillin, and antibacterial products, vaccines, and so on. And all of this I've done pretty much the whole turn of the source. So let's go talk of RPGs. This is the cover book of Star Wars Segregation, which is a good example of what I want to propose, which is proper non-magic healing for medieval fantastic RPGs, mainly Dungeons & Dragons. In D&D and also Pathfinder, the non-magic healing is limited to the heal skill, that all it does is that over time the natural healing is doubled. So it's basically useless, and many medieval fantastic RPGs are in the same case, where the healing is basically useless or non-existent. Of course, there likely are cases that I have either forgot or not read, but for the sake of the example, I shall use 2nd edition, which can be applied to 3.5 and Pathfinder, and with some more brewing to the other editions and even some other games. Of course, being a D20 game and the best of the system, it would work with all D20 games. This game had non-magic healing in mind, which is why it was meant to be good, because it has to be the main healing, unlike of course fantasy world where magic healing, and by the way yes, force heal does exist in it, but it does have its limit. And meanwhile in the fantasy world, we got a bit of a logic problem where they were meant to have the magic healing in mind, thanks to the cleric and their divine powers, but they don't have the rest. Magic potions, spells by any spellcasters, that's another 100 of gold piece, while the majority of the population live with silver and copper. So you got a bit of a price problem. That makes it so that basically only adventurers and nobles could afford any healing at all. But then again, we do have a problem that healing that would be cheap enough to be accessible with the population would be abused by the player. For example, if the lawful good church do as the church did in history and just provided healing for people, of course the players would profit from that. Well, I say profit from that, technically we weren't there, but it was made with certain economic balance for the players who are on this whole other level with like thousands of gold pieces from raiding dungeons and other adventures, while basically live in a parallel economy from the rest of the world. The problem is that because of that, the rest of the world gets forgotten, and therefore there's nothing there, which leaves a consistency hole that will be filled by including my suggestion. The suggestion, so this has treat injury compared to it. Yes, it still does the increase of natural healing, but can heal someone, there's surgery to heal more, can revivify someone that died last round, can treat disease and poison. Then there's more sci-fi stuff such as treating radiation and giving mechanical prosthesis. But unless you're in a medieval punk setting that has sci-fi element, you can leave that. For the rest, you can split it. So most of the skill would be put into the treat injury skill, also as is. And of course, by the way, if you beat the DC by a high enough margin, you do some extra healing. So this would be the base surgery skill that regular healer use. So the surgeons that will patch you up, they've got this skill, they do the thing. For the poison and the disease, if they have the proper medicine, they can apply it. So that would be treat injury pretty much as is, but of course there would be the limits of what can be done. So some wounds will be beyond them. And of course some wounds beyond, if you lost the limb, you can put it back. So they do have some limits, but they can do a lot of stuff and deal some decent damage. Then we get the apothecary skill. Could be several type of skill, but I would suggest go with profession apothecary. It includes the knowledge of the medicine, how to make them, what are the elements, what cure goes with what elements. And so with the apothecary skill, you make Kingdom Come Deliverance-style potions that will work over hours for a certain effect. So the Marigold deconcoction, it would heal a few D4, let's say 3 D4 for Marigold and 10 D4 for Lazarus, and it works over a few hours. It's something that would cost a few coppers, maybe a silver. For players, it means that if they are out of spells, they are not out of option. And if they have money problem, not out of option either. To make the potions, basically it's think of how many ingredients to go with Kisses. It would be the number of ingredients and steps and power of the potion. You base the DC on that. Then you roll, you roll there enough, you can make more. And so you got the apothecary that can go, okay, you got this disease, I'm gonna go make this cure with those plants that I know. And you got the surgeon that go, well, time to sew you back up. Doop, doop, doop. And of course, the surgeon can use the healing balm made by the apothecary. And if someone is both, well, it's basically the university trained doctor. With those two skills, you already have a good enough base. Of course, for the potions, how to justify them, since yes, you can add special plants that have some special properties, such as, oh, this flower has a special pollen that makes good gum against frostburn, or this plant is good against acid and so on. Sure, magic could be included, but it would mostly be to ghost pepper eye. Ghost pepper, due to selective breeding, has the chemical that makes it spicy in basically harmful quantities, wherein the natural pepper barely has any of it. So you apply that logic to other plants, and suddenly garlic is not super garlic that can't be served as antibiotic. So yeah, I could take a pill, or I take the super garlic, I can make some potion that will cure the germ-based disease. So you've got the bubonic plague, you've got leprosy, there, you can be cured. For viruses, it would be a plant that boosts the immune system. Granted, that would work on germs too. You can also have diseases that are beyond an apothecary's power to cure. Maybe they don't know yet on the medicine, maybe they just don't have a medicine. And it's the same with poison. Maybe for some poison, they would have some anti-poison or other means to deal with it, but some could be beyond their head. You can help people, but of course there would be the limit that if you don't know the poison or the ingredients are too rare and inaccessible, maybe there is no antidote. So basically, you can do a lot that would help most everyday people, but there are still limits that would need a cleric. There are limits that could possibly lead to needing a quest or something for some special ingredients. So the magic killer are not outclassed. In fact, all they do is having more options, because now, yeah, sure, I'm a priest or a paladin, but I'm also more of a hospitalier type, and I do this side healing stuff. Therefore, I've used all my magic, I've got these other options, and it has a roleplay element, and it makes the world more consistent, and that will bring me to the final addition, synergy. So, yeah, sure, I'm a surgeon, but I can't put back an arm that fell off. Oh, there's the cleric, but he doesn't have regeneration yet, so can't replace the arm that fell off. What do? They work together. The surgeon kind of sew back the arm in good place, try to set things right. He can't really attach it in a way that would work, but at the moment the arm is there, is in good shape, and it is sufficiently connected, then the cleric can go and do his spell, and now the arm is back up. That of course implied that you still have the arm, so it didn't fall into lava or something. It wouldn't work on bringing someone back to the dead unless of course you've got the both spells. So, oh no, it was dead, I'm putting the head back. Okay, now cleric reattach it, and since it is soon enough, look, revivify spell, or it's not then you have to bring the resurrection into resurrection. But these are options. And of course, with the bombs, potions, other surgery, it would work too. On a mechanical point, it would be that you can do some combos that would replace higher level spell if you've got the right elements, and more importantly, because the body is in a pre-healed state, now the magic is maximized. So you do your healing spell, it does a number of d8s, all the dice are maximized, therefore you do only a bunch of 8s and the other bonuses. So maximized because it was pre-healed, and some extra combo for the extra fun. And of course, if you can more easily replace lost limb, then you can have more fun into cutting off the limbs of your players, so think about that. Nice little synergy to go with the two skills that also work together. I do think the result would be satisfying, and on this I have some gorgonzola to eat. So nice to be in a place to dry my feet, eat and eat. So, short conclusion, they knew what they were doing up to a point, had their traditions, knew what most plan did, surgeons were competent, most prejudice comes from bad faith towards things that happened during the plague, and shenanigans that happened after the medieval period, but was blamed on it. So, now, I've got gorgonzola, I got to taste it, so let's just be safe. Rozjacz. And it's robust, and it is so good. So I be good day, and until next time.